Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 11 in the Maamor Mimana, Afar Yakov, which is the eighth discourse in the book B'Shasha Hegdimu, 5672. And this is going to be, I think, class number 2 in chapter 31. Okay. So I like the numbers of this class. It's the eighth discourse. Eight is this infinite energy. It's number 11. 11 is also my favorite number, so this is good. Here we go. So in the last class, we were learning how these three stages of the evolution of the light, as the light of the potential, the internal light, what we call the or pnimi, which eventually is going to manifest in the vessels. It goes through three stages. The original element of the stage, the original state of the light is still a one with the Ein Sof. Then it emerges outward as a line, as a kav, as a line, as a gilui, a revelation of the 10 spheros. When they're still in their source, you don't even notice they're 10. When they come forth out, when it comes out into revelation, then we have we have 10 spheros already. And then after that, but they're all, they're not really recognizable to be differentiatable and specified as individual spheres. In other words, it's still very, very, very much experienced as in a very abstract way. And then when finally the light goes into the vessels pull forth the subtle hints and notes and tones that are really there in the light, bring it out into full expression and definition. Okay, so we were learning that these three stages is the concept of a point, a line, and a space. So a Nakuda point is the original state where everything is just a dot, like a decimal point, all concentrated. All 10, are all included, and you don't even see one is different than the other. Then there is the kav. So last week in the last class we learned that the kav is really the revelation of the hidden potentials that are all in the original state, and essentially the lights are not changing; they are emerging as they are in their essence. So they're not descriptive yet, because they're not yet a real revelation. They're not expressing their unique qualities. It's just that they're presenting themselves, that there are many nekudat. I thought of an example today, and obviously it's very limited in the example, but just that you get the idea of what I think, what makes it easier for us, especially since we are so used to this on a computer. So you have a file. You have a folder. The folder is, an entire folder that has an entire project included in that folder. In the folder is the point. It's the entire project, whatever this project you're working on, is in one folder. Then the folder has many files. So when you click on the folder, you see a bunch of files. They'll come forth, the icons or whatever it is, the descriptions. You'll have these like a link, this file, this file. And over here, you don't really have yet. When you look at these links, you don't even know anything really, unless if you obviously you title it, but there's not much there other than, let's say it's each link is now going to be a picture, right? Each link is going to be a picture of, let's say we're talking about a space. So each one is a picture of a different part of the space. It's a house, it's a kitchen, it's a bedroom, it's the upstairs, the downstairs. But when you're clicking on the file and you're opening up these pictures, the pictures are just these icons. It's not yet. You don't see a picture yet. You're just seeing a kind of a link. That's the link to the picture. Then you click on each individual file and it opens up, And that's where the picture is. Okay? So essentially what he's been saying earlier is that the original Nakuda, the original point, is a very, very abstract state. And it's so abstract that you don't even see that there are 10 elements inside that point. It all looks like one point. Stage number 2 is it opens up some more, but it doesn't change the nature of the abstraction. All you get is that you see that there are many points in that one point. That's it. Because when they're coming out, they're just lining up as points. That's what a line is. It's a bunch of dots. That means you don't have anything more than the dot. Like when you're opening up the file, you still don't see anything. You don't. It's just the potential for something, so to speak. But now you see that there is 10 items as opposed to one folder. The real image you're going to get once you move to the next stage and click on each one, and it will open up into a space. So that's what he said over here regarding the kav. The kav are the spheros as they are still in a hiyuli state. In a hiyuli state means as they are in their source. They're just revealing. What comes out is just the essence of it, but not the details of it, the expression of it. As opposed to the first state, where in the essence itself, you didn't see the individual essence of each thing. It was all submerged in as one. Okay. So let's v'ayim asher kasav. Okay, v'hu, and we're going to learn. This is on page Nun Aleph over here. V'hu shamadreges prat yishaboy, which means that the individual levels that are inside of it, hein bebchinas nekudais, are in a point of dots, u bebchinas pshitas, and in a state of abstraction. V'shambira inyan over there. Over there, he explains. Now he's going to give you. What he's going to do over here is that he's going to compare it. This 3 stages, all the SS spheroids, agnuzais, the 10 spheroids, as they are still ganos, they're still hidden. That's stage number 1. Then after the tzimtzum, they come out as a kav, as a line, and then finally they manifest. Each one drops into its own vessel, and it becomes already very defined as chachma, chesed, chachma, bina, das, chesed, gevur, each sphere on its own. So that's the 3rd stage when the oil goes into the keli. So now he's going to take the same idea, and he's going to show us that there is this concept exists in a more specific place in the order of evolution. Meaning, what he did earlier was he started much higher. The Esa Spheres Agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres, are still pre-Tzimtzum. And that's a very, 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 very distant high level. That's a beginning of the beginning of the beginning. And then the next stage is also very high, because we know the Kav, the line that issues forth, that becomes the right after the Tzimtzum, is even higher than the first configuration, which is Adom Kadmon, primordial man. And then after that comes many, many, many levels until you get to Atzilus. So what we just did was, and then the lights go into the vessels, into the containers. So we're basically looking at the sum totality of the entire order. Now he's going to, in order to make this a little bit, to give us some kind of, to be able to compare it to maybe something that might be more familiar to us meaning those who study Kabbalah and mysticism and he will show us these 3 levels, but in a more concentrated place, not on such a broad, general state, but in a more specific place. And he's going to start off on a level that's much lower, but relative to the next, to the next stage. In other words, it's going to be the same 3 stages, but in a more specific level, and the specific level is in a lower level of the evolution of the worlds. As he goes, Visham, and over there, what does he mean over there? He means earlier he mentioned his own discourse from many years earlier from Reish Nun Beis. Reish Nun Beis is 20 years prior to him writing this discourse. So he's referencing to a discourse called Kol Hanehen Reish Nun Beis. And he says, check it out over there where we discuss this idea of the three stages, how the light emerges. So over there he says, I compared it to something else. The shaman over there, Bir Inyan, he explained it, the matter, Shezahu Kamayakudim, that this is compared to the three stages of Akudim, Nekudim, and Shezahu Kamayakudim, Nekudim. He's not talking about the three stages. We're now trying to develop the difference between stage number one, where of abstraction, and stage number two of abstraction. Stage number three is no more abstraction. Stage number three is already enclothement, manifestation. But stage number one and stage number two are both in the abstract. But there's a difference between the two. First stage is abstract of abstract, where you don't even see 10 points. And second stage is where you have an enumeration. Remember, he gave the example, the difference between the Torah Shabiksav, the written Torah, where it says you're not allowed to do malacha, you're not allowed to do work on Shabbos, and you get the general idea, the gist that you're not allowed to do work, but you don't know what is included in work, on labor that is forbidden on Shabbos. And then when you learn the Mishnah, you find out 39 labors are included. But you don't really have an idea what those 39 labors are. You just have a one-liner. You don't really have an expansiveness of it. For that, you need to learn the Talmud, and the Talmud will open it all up and fully develop what it means, each one of these. What building, what is considered building on Shabbos, and what is considered sewing on Shabbos, and what is considered trapping on Shabbos, and the likes. So you need the Talmud to flesh it out. So what he's saying is the Mishnah and the Chumash and the Scripture are both levels in the abstract, but the difference is in the Chumash and Scripture it's all literally one, and in Mishnah it's enumerated. You're already clicking open the files, and you're seeing that you're clicking open the folder, and you're seeing there's many files there, and maybe you have just a one-word description on each one or a sentence, but that's not really a comprehension. It's not really an understanding. So it's still very vague. That's the point. So over there, he explains that in the worlds, in the evolution of worlds, we also have a concept of a world called Akudim. There's a level of a world called Akudim. Vinikudim, and there's a level of world called Nikudim. So what is that? Lower than Adam Kadmon, lower than primordial man, there is a stage which the Arizal calls Akudim. What's Akudim? Akudim are where you have all 10 spheros, all unified in one vessel. Which means that they share one vessel, they share a space, because they are the lights are still so undifferentiated that they can reside together in one point. And that's the world of Akudim. Nikudim is when the 10 spheres, when the 10 attributes come forth, each one has a point, a powerful, potent point. And then they have already 10 vessels. However, the 10 vessels of Nikudim are very poignant vessels. Very, very non-expansive, very potent and powerful, and very, very, very concentrated. And there's no interaction between vessel and vessel. What that means is that the vessels are not developed to be what we call a configuration. A configuration is the next stage. That would be already the stage of Berudim. Berudim is when you're kind of seeing the hidden nuances in each vessel and how they interact one with each other. So what he's saying is now is that he's doing a comparison, and he's saying The Esa Spheris Agnuzais, which is really much higher than the world of Akudim, because we said earlier, the Esa Spheris Agnuzais is the hidden 10 spheres that we're talking about over here, is pre-Tzimtzum, before the even Tzimtzum. The Akudim level that he's talking about over there is much lower down in the evolution of worlds, because Akudim is after Adam Kadmon. It's already a lower level after Adam, and Adam Kadmon comes after the Kav, and the Kav comes after the Tzimtzum. And we're talking about, but he's still lining up the same concept. Just like we say in Akudim that many lights are so unified that they share one vessel, in the same way, the 10 spheres, but on a much, much, much loftier level, the 10 spheres, when they're still included in the Or Ein Sof, are like that idea. They're all one point. I think, and I'm unsure of this, but I think there is a very important distinction between the two, and this is important to notice right at the beginning, is that when we're talking about the 10 spheres that are included in the Or Ein Sof, we're only talking about lights. We're not talking about vessels at all. So when we say they're all one point, there's no vessel there. It's just one point of light. It's pure Or. There's no container. There's no vessels. It's way before the whole idea of vessels. In the world of Akudim, there's already the beginning of the development of vessels. It's only that the vessel is beginning to form one vessel for all the 10 powers. But that's important to differentiate and understand that makes all the difference over here. We'll see soon in a moment that it will make a difference. But the comparison is still the same, is that we have a concentrated point with many things in it versus the next stage where all those points show themselves. But when they show themselves as they are. They don't try to explain themselves. They don't try to reveal, meaning to, they're still in a very potent, essential, the way they are in their essence. They're not in a state of revelation, which the state of revelation is always a weakening of something. The Akudim, the level of Akudim, Ushu Esek Sarim, that's the level where there are 10 crowns. These are the essential lights of all the spheres. They're still in a level where you can't even recognize the light of Chachma, the Keser of Chachma. Here we're dealing with only crowns. The crown of something is the essence of it. The crown of Chachma, the crown of Bina, the crown of Chesed, the crown of Gevura, the crown of all the spheres are not yet noticeable. They're all because they're crowns. But over here, it's like one crown that includes all 10 crowns. As he says, they're not yet in a state of B'tzios Nikaris, not in a recognizable state. And all of them are tied and bound up together. The Nekudim, and what's the next level, the world of Nekudim, who Shabbo is Galus, is that each of these crowns emerge outward to present itself as for what to present itself separate from the others. Shabbo is Galus. There's a lineup over here. What was all inside the folder now emerged out. As they are in their simple state and in their essential and in their essence. Ubedugma kazais, and similar to this, but on a higher level, hu inyan kav is the concept of the kav. What is a kav? A line. But see, why is it higher? Because this is already talking about in the development of the vessels. You have already a vessel here. It's one vessel with 10 lights, and here it's actually going to be 10 vessels. Developing already into 10 vessels. And energy in a vessel. However, it's not the vessels of Atzilus, it's only the keter, it's only the crown of the vessel, which means the very, very the very abstraction of abstraction of abstraction of the vessel, but it's already the vessel. As opposed to higher that we're talking over here, the kav, and even what's before the kav, the SS, and for sure what's before the kav, there's no vessels there. It's just the pure lights themselves also go through these two these two stages. Because remember, we're following the point that the differentiation between one sphera, one attribute, and the other attribute is not only coming from the vessels; it's really in the light as well. The light has 10 tones in it, but in their original state, it's you don't even notice 10. It's all one simple light. Second stage is that there's a recognition that there are 10 things, but you can't really taste it yet. You're not sure if it's vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. It's just too abstract. But you already noticed there's 10. So that's the point. There's nekudes over here. We're doing because I swing in a kav is the kav. Mashamechaber nekudes rabim it mishemechibor from this that it from an attachment of a bunch of dots. Nasa hakav that creates or that brings the line. Dahainu his galus ha'oros, the revelation of the lights. Bibchenas pshitos in a state of pashut. Rak. But now he's going to say there is a difference between these two, the comparison that we just made. On the one hand, we compared. On the other hand, there's a major difference, and that is that in the line, when the line emerges, the kav emerges. One of they're all attached to each other. How do you have many dots forming one line? And when they form one line, you might not even notice that the line is made up of a bunch of dots. Why? Because they all perfectly get along with each other, which means they're fully unified one with the other. So much so that you don't even notice. You can see. If you're looking carefully, you can see 10 points, but because they're so subtle, they don't clash with each other. They're too abstract to clash. Even though eventually when they will drop from their abstraction and manifest and express, they will be absolute opposites and can never get along with each other. But at this point, they're still so subtle that two opposite points can sit with each other because they're not yet flaunting their colors and of what they are. It's still, they're keeping it very inward. However, that is as long as we're dealing with the second stage in our case, because we're talking about the kav. And as we said earlier, we're talking about there's no vessels over here. It's just light. However, in the stage of akudim nekudim, we're over there, we said also there was first one, all 10 lights are all in one vessel, which means you can't see the differences. And then they come out. Over there, when they come out, they don't come out like a line. They come out as 10 points that are racing in all directions, and they have nothing to bond them. That's why and this level is called the world of tohu, the world of chaos, which for those familiar with the concept of tohu know that it was anafim mispardim. It was a complete branches that didn't get that separated, and there was no cohesiveness in that universe. Everything was running in its own direction. Everybody had their own ideas without any unity. And not only that, each one wanted to swallow the other. They didn't leave room for each other. So it's the opposite of hiskalalut, of integration, and as he explains over here. And then we have to understand why. Why in our case, when the Or Ein Sof emerges and starts to present its individual files that are contained in the folder, they still hug each other and are perfectly attached to each other. And in the level of akudim, when they go out into a state of nekudim, into points, there is bloody war. How does that work? It explains in a minute. Let's see. In the world of nekudim, there are branches that go off each one in its separate direction. But in the kav, they're in a state of unity. Why? So he explains. The difference is when it reveals itself and it wants to be in a state of beingness, which means it wants to flaunt who it is. This is the concept of nekudim. it's coming out from, in other words, they're emerging from a hidden state. And then all these 10 points were all sharing one space. So they're emerging from, but they're emerging each one to make a presentation, to reveal itself, to say who it is. Then shu is galus shazau in nekudim. This is the idea of nekudim. Shu has galus. This is the revelation of the sfirot. It's the first debut of the spheroids. The spheroids are coming out, each one to make a presentation. I am here. Yes, Leois, and therefore is galos Leois b'bchinas metzios, to be in a state of existence. And that's why they're called crowns, which the idea of a crown over here being it, they want to rule. They're kings. Come on, no emloch. I'm setting the order. It's going to be my way. Then they're precisely because they're coming out, and they're not filtered. That's the point of the first revelation. It's coming out as organically, as essentially, and it's not filtered with any filtrations. So it comes out with such ferocious sense of its own self, and it doesn't want to hear anything from anybody else. That's tohu. And that's why each one wants to be a king, and that's why this whole world collapsed, because there was a collision. The spheros just couldn't handle. They clashed with each other. They collapsed. They broke. Intentionally, it was this way, but that's that story. It didn't end well. Now the French. Let's contrast that to the kav. The idea in the kav is that the point of the hisgalus is that the revelation is not to dominate or not to express itself to the outside, but rather loyally as b'chinas metzios, not to be in a state of existence, rak hisgalus levad, only to reveal itself, only to announce itself. So what's the difference? Let's treat what that means. It's obviously this is hard. It's hard, but let's see if it's. I think it means that it depends if it's revealing itself to someone, to set the order, to set the agenda. Kindness is coming out to create a kind world. In Nekudim, since we're dealing already with Kalim, like we discussed earlier, the whole idea of Kalim is to present already, is to relate already to a creation. Now, the point over here is it's emerging as a force that's related to the other. It's related already to present itself. So since it's revealing itself, it's coming forth to present itself to the outside, El Azulas, to someone other than itself. So then it has much more of what we might call an ego, of how it wants to be and it wants to dominate. But when you're not stepping up for a presentation, for example, let's take a great scholar who's sitting and has ideas, and they just write the ideas down just that they can bring it out on paper, or they record themselves, or they just verbalize it and articulate, not to anybody. So what's happening over here is just that a hidden thing is just coming out to the open. But it's not, its point is not to reveal itself to. Once it's revealing itself to something, it has a certain rigidity of self. And that rigidity of self doesn't tolerate the opposite. That's where they clash. But over here, it's just to come from from being non-expressed to expressed. And therefore, the expression is far subtler. And since the expression is so much more subtler, we're dealing with a much deeper abstraction. And therefore, they can line up with each other, each one, and they don't feel that they're being rubbed the wrong way by their neighbor, because they're not rigid and self-absorbed or they're not on the microphone. They're not seeking the attention. They're not. It's not. When the esespheres of tohu collapsed is because each one said, "Ano emloch," I will be king. Which means I want the, even it's amazing, even though we're talking about divine attributes, but each divine attribute claimed that its idea of a creation, that the creation is going to be extremely kind, that's what kindness was suggesting the worlds would run only on kindness. And discipline was saying, what are you, insane? That was never going to work. Let me run the show. I'm gonna be very demanding, and you'll see everybody's going to be in line. Everybody's going to behave. And kindness said, the whole world will be destroyed instantly. So the two couldn't even look at each other. They didn't even begin a conversation. But in our cases, he says, like a great wise man, hamagala or sichlai, who's just revealing his light of his intelligence. He's not trying to show it to anybody. He's not trying to influence. He's not making a presentation he's not giving a class. He's just revealing it. So the fact that it's just revelation, but the point over here in his revelation is just to reveal. So when he reveals, he's revealing the concepts in the most abstract way, the closest it is when he had it in his mind. As Bo'im Bavshata, the ideas are coming in a very clean and very abstract way. And therefore you can't recognize yet the differences between them. It's not like the other case where they want to actually muscle their way, and by presenting when you're coming out because you want to make a statement, you can't be vague because you're not making a statement. So you have to stay your statement. But when you're coming out just to express, then you don't have to make a statement. So you can express things in a very abstract form. And that's the reason, hence they get along with each other. Question is, Baal El Perek Yutes a mashal. We gave the example through a mashal, but Seichel Mufshat, with an abstract idea of teacher. Sheyuchelis Arifim or Seichel Hafchi. We said two teachers that are still two wise men that are very, very great scholars, and they're in the very, very, very abstract. They can both, make statements that are, or teach a teaching, or deliver an idea, and these two ideas are completely opposite than each other. But because of the subtleties of it, the student or the person listening will not even realize that there's a clash. It will look like it's the same. Seem like it's the same because of the abstraction of it. And it can mix with Or Seichel Hafchi Mufshat Kamkin Kamoyu. That is also Mufshat, like it's not. There's no fireworks between them. Once the scholars start bringing it down more from its abstraction, and therefore starting clothing it more into enclothement, then you're going to start sensing the differences, how these two are really going on two different directions. And it's going to become more noticeable how when you build, they're building out, and it's a whole different teaching coming from one than the other. But after that, you have to give it a little bit more flesh. You have to flesh it out a little bit. And then you can see that these are two different paths. Like we learned, Shmai and Naftalian there was very subtle. And Shammai and Hillel, it starts becoming more noticeable. Okay, we're going to leave it over here. This was just a parenthesis, where he took the idea that he said earlier, that there is a state where the abstraction is so abstract you don't even see many. And then there's another state where the abstraction, where it does come out in a very abstract manner, but you're already noticing that there's more than one point. Okay. Leave it over here. We'll continue Bez Hashem next class.